The elevator doors slid open with a metallic hiss, and the CEO of the towering glass building stepped inside. She was a woman known for her poise, her sharp intelligence, and the cold aura that often surrounded her. People usually held their breath when she entered a room, but this time, something unexpected happened. Just as the doors closed, a small boy standing beside a janitor tugged at her sleeve and whispered in a trembling voice, "Don't talk." The CEO froze, startled. No one had ever dared to speak to her like that, least of all a child. But there was something in his eyes, something urgent and filled with fear, that stopped her from responding. For a long, silent moment, the elevator hummed as it descended, carrying three people who couldn't have been more different: the powerful CEO, the janitor in his faded uniform, and the boy who clutched his father's hand tightly as if holding on to life itself. That moment would change everything. If you're listening right now, stay with me till the end of this story, because what happened next will not only shock you but might just remind you of the power of kindness and listening. And before we dive deeper, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because stories like this are made to touch hearts, and yours might be the next one changed. The CEO, whose name was Miranda, glanced down at the boy. He was about 7 years old, his hair messy, his eyes wide and bright, but filled with something that didn't belong to a child: fear. His father, Daniel, the janitor, looked away nervously as though embarrassed by his son's sudden command. Miranda wanted to speak, to ask why, but something inside told her to stay silent. The elevator descended slowly, but when it jolted suddenly and stopped between floors, the lights flickered. Miranda reached for the emergency button. Just as she was about to speak, the boy shook his head furiously and whispered again, "Don't talk." His little hand pressed against his lips. Confused, Miranda obeyed. Minutes passed in tense silence until they heard muffled voices coming from the other side of the elevator shaft. Men. Rough, hurried voices. They weren't repairmen. They weren't security. They were strangers speaking about breaking into offices, about grabbing what they could. Miranda's blood ran cold. She realized then why the boy didn't want her to talk. If she made a sound, they would be discovered. Her heart pounded. She was the CEO of this company. If those men realized she was trapped inside, she could become their primary target. But how did the boy know? She looked at him again. He was pale, trembling, but his eyes were sharp with awareness. Daniel finally spoke in a whisper. "I'm sorry, ma'am. My son, he's different. He notices things. Hears things others don't." Miranda's chest tightened. She thought back to the boy's warning. Maybe he wasn't just scared. Maybe he had saved them. The minutes stretched on, each second heavy with fear. Miranda watched the janitor wrap his arm protectively around his son. She had seen Daniel many times before, pushing his cart through the hallways, head down, invisible to everyone else. She had never spoken to him beyond a curt nod. But now, trapped together, she saw him differently, not just as a janitor, but as a father willing to shield his child from the world. Finally, the voices faded. Hours seemed to pass before the elevator buzzed back to life, and the doors opened. Security rushed forward, shocked to see their CEO standing silently beside a janitor and his son. The intruders had fled, leaving behind chaos, but Miranda had been saved, because of a boy's whispered warning. That night, Miranda couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. That boy's eyes, his words, "Don't talk." What if she had ignored him? What if she had laughed at him? She would have walked right into danger. For the first time, the woman who had always relied on logic and strategy realized that sometimes the smallest voices held the greatest wisdom. The next morning, she called Daniel into her office. He came hesitantly, clutching his son's hand, worried he was about to lose his job. Instead, Miranda stood up, walked around her desk, and knelt down in front of the boy. "You saved me," she said softly. And I owe you my life. The boy smiled shyly, hiding behind his father. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He doesn't talk much to strangers, he said quietly. But when he knows something, he knows. Miranda offered Daniel something that would change their lives forever. She learned that Daniel was struggling, raising his son alone after his wife had passed away. Money was tight, and he often worked double shifts just to afford his boy's medical needs. Miranda promoted him to head of building security, giving him better pay and stability. But she didn't stop there. She set up a scholarship for the boy, believing his sharp mind and unique awareness deserved every opportunity. Over time, Miranda grew close to them both. She started joining Daniel and his son for lunch breaks, listening to their stories, learning about their struggles. For the first time in years, she felt something she had lost in her climb to success: connection, family, warmth. Years later, that boy grew up to be a brilliant young man, graduating top of his class, and eventually stepping into the company Miranda once ran. He never forgot the day in the elevator when his small voice changed the future, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in him afterward. And as for Miranda, she learned one of the most valuable lessons of her life: power doesn't come from titles or wealth.